Welcome to the AcuProsper podcast, where we get smart, real, honest, and empowered about creating a thriving acupuncture clinic. I'm Katie Altnew, your host. I'm an acupuncturist, herbalist, and ABORM certified fertility acupuncturist with a clinic in Denver, and I'm the founder of AcuProsper, which is my side passion project where I teach acupuncturists how to start, grow, and market their acupuncture clinics. And I'm the author of the book, Acupuncturists Mean Business. In season 2 of this podcast, it's all about passing the mic to others, specifically to a few of the many acupuncturists out there that I admire and feel inspired by. We are going to get a look inside their journeys, their practices, struggles, mindset, marketing, and more. We're getting real, and we are having some hard and honest conversations about everything from burnout to cultural appropriation. My goal is to show that there are many paths up the mountain, that there's not one singular definition of success or way to get there, and to break down the taboos about discussing business in our healing field and our livelihood. If you'd like to see the video version of this podcast, you can find it on the blog at acuprosper.com. And it is pretty cool to see these acupuncturists' faces light up as they talk about their practices and their passion. Thank you for being here and for making this a safe space to share and explore these journeys and ideas. I hope it shows us what's possible and helps us to feel connected and supported. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. So today I have a guest I'm really excited about. It is Ali Damron, and she is an acupuncturist that is actually a friend of mine. She practices here in the Denver area as well. She has practiced acupuncture and has recently transitioned with COVID to a totally virtual practice. And she also has online course offerings, offers the Dutch test, has a lot of other offerings that I think will be really fun to hear the inside scoop on. And I just love Ali because we actually didn't go to school together. She reached out to me and asked if I wanted to get coffee, and I said, yes, I'd love to meet you. And now we've just been cheering each other on and supporting each other. And I love our acupuncture community for that.
I do
really
too.
Each other's cheerleaders. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So will you just tell us a little bit about first kind of your journey of building your practice, how you became an acupuncturist and what it was like as you created your practice?
Yeah, so I went to school about 12 to 10 years ago in the Phoenix area. And so I was pregnant when I graduated with my oldest. And I think through that experience, I just wanted to do more women's health stuff. And so I started getting really passionate about fertility, pregnancy, postpartum. And then it kind of sparked my interest, I guess, in more hormonal stuff. And so I first started when I was pregnant with my oldest. And this is really funny now, but I rented this little room out of this pregnancy wellness center in Parker here in Colorado. And my overhead was $300 a month. Just first starting, I didn't know anybody here. We just moved from Arizona. And that's what the cost was for a few days. And sadly, I couldn't even cover that. It was real hard. And I had just had a baby, trying to market with a newborn. I didn't have a lot of childcare, and I didn't really want to pay for childcare because I couldn't pay my overhead. And so that's kind of how I started, and slowly just started hitting the ground running when I could, trying to market, reach out to doulas and fertility experts, OBs, those types of things. And as I started to just get patients, it started to get a little bit better. But I just decided at a point, maybe 18 months later, that I was going to go work at a chiropractic office. And it was more of an employee situation, which was more stable when I had an 18-month-old and was going to get pregnant again and have my second. And so I did that for 3 years maybe, and just sort of grew with them. It was wonderful, actually. It was a great experience for me to kind of get my feet under myself, start growing my practice. And then after about 3 years of that, I started renting my own room at a different acupuncturist office here in town. And I did that simultaneously about 4 years ago. I decided to start growing my online business. I knew that I always wanted to do that. That was actually a passion of mine for even like 10 years before.
Wow.
I just always wanted to be an online entrepreneur and do that, have a little bit more freedom. And so I finally decided to pull the trigger probably like, I think it's been 4 years now. And, start just growing my following, growing my email list, growing virtual consults, growing courses, those types of things. And so I was actually really in a great position when COVID hit. I'm super, super lucky. And so it was really easy for me just to make the decision to sort of pull the plug on the in-person acupuncture because my kids were home. We had no idea when they were going back to school.
Oh my God.
My youngest daycare closed. Like there was lots and lots of stuff with the childcare that I just needed flexibility. I needed to be on a dime, be able to stay home. And I was able to do obviously virtual that way. My kids were 4 and 7. Now they're 5 and 8. And so I could kind of make that work. And so that's what I did. And, I had always had intention of going back to my office eventually, and it just sort of has grown. And now, to be 100% honest, like I'm booked out for 6 or 7 weeks and I don't have space to go back. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's gone so well. That's so great. I love that so I just want to back up a little bit. So you've like had a ton of different experiences. You've rented a room from another acupuncturist. You've been in an employee situation for a chiropractor. And then you have this online business too. Did you, when you created the online business, was it a whole separate business or is it under the same?
It's under the same LLC, but totally separate.
Cool. Neat. And so when you were working in the clinic, how many rooms were you working out of?
So probably like 2, both at the chiropractic office that I was an employee at. And that was honestly like such a great thing for me because it was almost like I was my own boss. Like I got the benefits of being my own boss, to be honest, because I got to kind of determine my own schedule. I got to market how I wanted to. I got to kind of do that stuff, but also had sort of the safety net of, not having to pay for overhead. Like that wasn't my responsibility. And so at a time when I was having babies and stuff, that was just such a great thing. And I loved my boss very, very much there too.
So it sounds like it was a situation where you were were you giving them a percentage of whatever you brought in?
I had to pay them 50%.
50%. Okay. And you didn't have to pay them rent, but were they also giving you patients? Sending you patients?
Yes. Yeah. So he would send some patients, but
not, you weren't like full. You still had to do some of your own marketing.
I did. Yeah.
I feel like that's really helpful to talk about for people who might be starting out and looking for positions, that there's lots of different ways to structure that. And that basically what you had is pretty ideal in some ways, because it's basically like you didn't have a set overhead, but you had all this freedom. You were basically running your own business.
I was.
But you didn't have the overhead.
Yeah. And I was under, I still had my own LLC, Denver Acupuncture and Wellness. And so I still used I had his business cards and my own. And so I was able to just sort of still work on building myself as a person, as an acupuncturist, but also, like I said, had some safety net. And so, I didn't have as much autonomy maybe as I did when I solely rented my own and into now, but really it was a really ideal situation for the time that I was in.
And 50%, I think that's also really helpful to tell people because I think that can sound like a lot, right? Like giving away 50%, but it's actually, pretty reasonable considering you weren't having to pay rent. And I guess if you were seeing a high volume of patients, giving 50% away, if you crunch those numbers, could be like thousands of dollars.
Totally. Exactly. I was seeing probably I was there 2 days a week. So Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I was probably seeing 15 patients a week.
Yeah.
And once I kind of got my name going and got fuller there, I mean, that's why inevitably I made the decision to jump to my own, because I was giving away a lot.
Right. Yeah. And it's great to know, for people going into that, to crunch those numbers and know at what point would it be better to either try to set a cap with them, like a maximum number, which people always recommend that, but I don't know that exists out there as an option. But did you know in your head that at that point, that's when you should go off on your own, pay rent,
I think like I think it's a feeling. Like, I think I'm sure there's probably some math involved where you can like, say like, okay, I have this many patients a week consistently. I'm making this much, this is what my rent would be. Obviously, like you want to crunch all those numbers, but I also think there is some like intuition with it, because I found actually with the chiropractic office, just the way the business model was, they accepted insurance. And so I did too sometimes. And it was just different than the business model that I run. But so it was a higher turnover. So, I'd see people maybe like a few times, 3 or 4 times, but with fertility and women's health, like usually they're weekly and they're coming in for a while weekly. And so, it was kind of having to get a lot less patients. And then just honestly, I think with business owners, I say this a lot, if you just keep going, like your success is inevitable. I really do find that to be true. And I know that it's hard, obviously, in the early days, and I experienced my own fair share of that. But if you just keep going, keep finding patients, keep treating, keep putting yourself out there, people will find you eventually. And maybe it's not as fast as some other people that you've seen. But other people are in different situations. I didn't have any community here. I didn't know anybody. So I was literally starting from ground zero. And probably people built faster than I did, for sure.
Yeah, I know. I think if I had moved back to my hometown of Houston, I could have built a practice way easier. And I also moved here not knowing anyone. And that's hard. Yeah. I love what you said, though. I just want to like reiterate that. You said, if you just keep going, your success is inevitable. I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I also love what you said that, there's some math to know maybe, but like, that's just one of the factors, and layering on top of that intuition, how it feels to be there, the type of practice it is, all those other intangibles too are really
I think you have to look at yourself and just like know who you are as a business owner. Like look at your risk tolerance, look at your stress level, look at, what you want to take on, because you have your own clinic with employees and things like that. Like, it can be a lot. It can be a lot on your shoulders. And obviously we saw through COVID, things can change. I think something that a lot of us didn't really take into consideration before COVID is like, this isn't guaranteed. Like things can change very quickly.
Yeah. Never considered that before, that like we could be like shut down and prevented from practicing.
Totally. Me neither.
Yeah. Another thing I want to circle back to that I think might be helpful for listeners is that, so you were paying 50%, giving them 50%, and they weren't even, and you still had to do your own marketing. So if a person is looking at a situation where they are getting patient, like don't have to do their own marketing, they should expect to give like 70%.
If you're getting fed patients, just like not just having to show up, not buy supplies, not pay overhead, not do insurance really. I was paying for my own malpractice still and all of that stuff, my own LLC. But yeah, I would agree. I mean,
because I've had students be like, oh, I got this opportunity, but they want 70%. So I'm turning that down. And I'm like, don't pass up that opportunity. That's actually, and you had an interesting experience of having rented your own space and doing that route before. So you actually knew you were getting a good deal and probably didn't feel resentful of giving away 50%. Whereas someone like fresh out of school might not, who hasn't had the experience of trying to like cover all those expenses on their own, might not realize that it's a good deal. And I just say that so that then if they find that opportunity, maybe they have less resentment, feel more gratitude for their situation, because it can be a really lucky situation to find yourself in, either one of them.
I think so too. I mean, I think it's getting easier now, but there's not a whole lot of employment situations for acupuncturists. It can be kind of hard to find. And again, I think you just got to know yourself and your situation. But if you just need some money, it's a really great way to get some money going, get some experience out of school with treating various patients. And also, like I said, just not having the risk. And you can go out and grind as much as you want to build yourself to get out of that situation as quick as you want to. But it's a great place to start, I think.
Yeah. Because you not only have the you don't have the recurring monthly overhead costs, but also the startup cost is way less of like furnishing a whole place. Yeah. So that's a great way for people to start. And then you were able to move on, and were you able to take a lot of those patients with you?
Yeah. I would say that I built a pretty good rapport with a lot of them. And I was lucky here too, because I only moved like 3 miles down the road, and they didn't have a non-compete. They were like, yeah, we'll just send your acupuncture patients over to you, which I know is not always the situation. And so they were very lucky. I was very lucky in that regard too. Like I said, I had built some friendships and stuff with people and knew that they would follow me. But yeah, I mean, I just continued, I think, to network with OBs and doulas and things like that. And I also really niche down. So the chiropractic office that I was in, I started kind of working in women's health more, but I was still doing pain. I was still doing immune stuff. I was still kind of a generalist at that point. And I just really, I had started the online piece of things by the time I left, started branding myself a lot as women's health. And then it just sort of took off from there.
Yeah, I love that. And it's such a good point. People are always telling you to niche down and like pick your specialty. And it sounds like it did really help you to build a following and to market. It helped you know who to network with. It sounds like too.
Yeah,
doulas, OBs,
exactly.
Instead of being like, oh, everyone is a possibility. It makes it easier on you to know who to focus on in your message.
Totally. And, I think over the time of business, like I had done a couple like hospital births where I had come in and like worked on stalled labor and met some doulas that way. And we had gotten some good results. And so like from that point on, that doula sent me just tons and tons of people. And so as you just continue, you start to just meet people who will refer to you and, you get good results for other practitioners, things like that. They'll refer to you. So like I said, you just got to keep going with it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you say that because I think like I personally like hate the idea of networking if it feels like forced.
Yeah.
But what you said is really a good point that at some point it happens just organically. You make a connection. They become your friends or acquaintances, and like it doesn't feel so, I don't know, hard. And that
I did all like the typical networking stuff. Like I went to the business or the women's business groups and things like that. I mean, those were brutal. Like it was just like, stick your hand out, here's your business card. Like, what do you do? Okay, great. Turn around to the next person. And I don't think I got one patient ever from that.
Yeah, I hated those. Those were so draining. I did that like in my first few months of starting and was like, this is not for me. I cannot do such. I want like genuine connection, and didn't feel like that. But what you're saying is you keep going, you meet your people, you find your people. It does feel genuine.
Totally. And like I said, I mean, I just started eventually like doing more like one-on-one outreach. So I would, invite a doula that I knew had a lot of clients to coffee and just say, let's just get to know each other. And I think that's just such a more genuine way to do it.
Absolutely. And like, tell me about what you do and let's just talk. Yeah. I think that's such a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you like wish you had known when you were starting?
So I came from a family of entrepreneurs. So I always knew that I wanted to be one. And I always knew kind of how to do it to some extent. But, it's funny, actually, a colleague or a teacher at my old school called me 3 weeks ago and I hadn't talked to any of them in forever. And they said, do you feel like you got business training at school? And I was like, no, none at all. Like, I think maybe there was a business class. I can't even remember, but no, like they leave you leave school and they're just like, okay, this is how you treat patients. But it's like, well, how the hell do you get patients actually?
Right.
And so I think that I wish that I would have started, I think, with those more genuine connections. Like I did waste probably a year trying to just mass network because that's what I thought I needed to do. And so I think that I wish that I would have niche down quicker. Which I was at a pregnancy wellness center. So it was sort of niche down at that point even. But yeah, just developing like genuine conversations with people, I think. And honestly, social media in the last 10 years has obviously exploded more and more. And so, that
wasn't a thing when we started, right? I mean, not really.
No.
Not a big thing. Yeah.
No. So, I mean, now I think that's the direction that you kind of have to go.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, so back then it sounds like you got most of your clients through that networking. Now with your, you're not doing acupuncture, but with your online consults, and we should talk more about that too, but let me just ask this question first. How do you get, is it still networking that has that brings you most of your clients today?
So I'm going to be honest here. When I first wanted to do an online business, I had dabbled in it before, in blogging and podcasting and different things. And like I said, I always had this desire for 10 years, even before I went to acupuncture school, to do this. I wanted to do this and in some capacity be an online entrepreneur. And so 4 years ago, I was like, I'm going to do this. And it was kind of like the beginning of when programs and digital courses and those things kind of became a thing. And so I hired somebody who had been very successful in a fitness program to help me. And this person, I, hired her to help me, and I started doing like nutrition and those types of things, which I still do nutrition, but not really my product now at all. And so it's changed a lot. This has evolved a ton too for me, but this person had me as a mentor in her groups, did trainings with her and her clients and people. And so it really, really helped grow that piece of things for me.
That's awesome. So like one big connection really helped grow your following.
It did. Yeah. That's amazing. I joined a mastermind in 2019. And so I met some other women there. And so, I just do a lot of podcast interviews, a lot of trainings. I post a lot on social media. I do a lot of, I have my own podcast. I do a lot of like IGTVs and Facebook lives, and I've just gotten traction that way. I have a free Facebook group. I think all those things just together have.
Yeah, you do a lot. Yeah, so you have let's back that up. You just put a lot in there. You have a podcast, you do like Instagram TVs, and you have a Facebook group.
I do.
So that's interesting. I feel like everyone's says you need to do that. And the thought for me, I resist that so much because it sounds like more work to manage a group, but it's been a really helpful thing.
It's been so helpful. It's like, because they always say, in online to nurture your email list and, grow that and stuff. But, you send out emails once a week or whatever to nurture them. And in your Facebook group, you can nurture them daily. And so it's a close-knit group. It's like 2,600 people or so, 27.
That's huge.
And, they're all close. Like people, it's just a great community. And
amazing.
All I do to manage it, I don't do a lot. I just post what I'm going to post on social media in that group.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You don't have to come up with extra discussion topics.
Yeah. So I just post my education. Most of my stuff is education for the most part. Yeah. And so I'll just post the normal posts I'm posting on Instagram or my other Facebook page in that group. And sometimes I'll, write a question to them or something like that. They ask me questions. Sometimes that'll get conversation going. But I find it such a great way to nurture people and get them to kind of know, trust, all that stuff.
Absolutely. And so I think this could actually be an interesting marketing idea for an acupuncturist, right? Like they could start a free private group where people can join for free. You keep it private just for feeling safe there, creating a safe space.
Exactly.
And you could niche it down and be like there's a group in Denver called the Denver Crunchy Mamas. That's an idea of being let's create a group where we talk about natural holistic care for kids. And you create that group. It doesn't have to be an acupuncture group, but some other kind of related to holistic.
Yeah. Mine's just called Holistic Health with Ali Damron.
I love that. And the people want to come there to get more info from you, but then what gets created is a community. And your members do the work for you because they reply to discussion threads.
Exactly.
They give advice.
It does take some time to get that traction going. It's quiet at first and you kind of have to work for it. But I have noticed, I think it's been about 2 years now since I started it. And I have noticed more and more that when other women ask questions, that there's more people that respond now to them.
That's amazing. You should feel really proud to have created that because that really serves people,
Yeah, I love it. It's honestly one of my very favorite parts of my business.
Oh, that's really neat. So can you tell us more about your offerings, the online, because you do online courses, right? You have a Heal Your Hormones or something online course, but you also offer online consults. And is the Dutch hormone test part of the consults?
So I offer that. It can be, or you don't have to. I don't require it to work with me. But if, I always offer free 15-minute consults, and I like when people do those just so that we can meet each other, know it's a good fit. It's a little different than in acupuncture because in the office, even if it's not an amazing fit, like you can put needles in somebody and you can do that for everybody and it helps something. But when you're kind of like on the spot on a call, like you want to make sure that what they have going on is something that you feel like you can help with virtually. And so I like to have them do those calls so I know that for sure. And so on that call, if I feel like a Dutch test could serve them right, then I suggest doing it. If I'm like, yeah, I'm like, we need to do this, or this isn't the best option for you for testing or whatever, then I tell them that too. And I either suggest they go back to their doctor or use consumer-based testing or something like that if we need to. Or if we don't need to do any testing, that's great too. Sometimes we don't.
And so did you, since you transitioned from like being an acupuncture clinic to now totally virtual with COVID, did your patients transfer, like become online consults, or have you more just your online business has grown? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Mostly my online business has grown. Okay. I was about 50-50 before COVID. So in March 2020, I was about 50% online, 50% in person. So it was close to half and half. And I did get some people to come over, but for the most part, it's mostly just grown online.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point as acupuncturists maybe think about extending their online offerings, that it's not like we're trying. I think it's hard to try to substitute for an acupuncture visit and be like, well, let's just do it online. It's like a completely different service that you're providing.
I actually have a lot of people that go to acupuncturists in their community and still work with me online.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I'm assuming, are you mostly offering like diet, lifestyle interventions?
Yeah. So I do a lot of women's health stuff. And so I go through kind of my own mental checklist in my head is like what I call the 5 pillars to hormone health. And so it's number 1 is like looking at their stress response, their nervous system, how they're perceiving stress, self-care, those types of things. Number 2 is nutrition, 3 is sleep, 4 is exercise, and 5 is like vitamins, supplements, and herbs. So when we basically go through just a typical consult, like that you would go through in the office, like questionnaire intake. And then from there, when they're answering those questions, I'm just kind of in my head doing this mental checklist of like, okay, I think their stress response is really overactive, or their nervous system or whatever. We probably need to work on how they respond to that, like the brain science piece of things. Or, nutrition's off, their blood sugar's really off, or, they're over exercising or under moving or things like that. Their sleep is terrible. So I'm just kind of going through this like mental checklist of what I think we need to work on the most. And every patient's obviously a little bit different in the amount of time we need to spend on each one. But that's kind of how I do it.
Nice. And then you can tailor your recommendations based on that. And so do you tend to do a lot of follow-up online consults with each person? I
do. So typically the first one is about 50 minutes where we go through everything. I give them a comprehensive treatment plan with kind of like a concrete to-do list of like, I'm a big fan of like slow habit change. And this is more so in the realm of the online versus acupuncture. And so I usually give them like some homework of 1 to 2 things to do, whether it's eating more protein, bedtime routine, something with stress management, something like that. So we have homework, and then usually it depends on what's going on with the person, but usually I like to see them like 4 to 6 weeks later, just to make sure they're doing the stuff. And I always tell them that we kind of treat in layers. So I like to just kind of like peel the layer off the onion. So when they come to me, I ask them what their goals are, and we work on their goals first. And then if I always say like sleep and bowel movements are like the foundation. So even if those aren't goals, like that's where we start, if that's not happening. So that's kind of how I do it in the first one. And then from there, we just kind of see like what's better, what's completely resolved, what still needs to be worked on. And then I kind of just run it like how we run our clinic. Like a lot of people online I know have packages and make people like stay on. I don't like to do that because I don't know how long it's going to take. Right. I just don't. I give them 50 minutes for the initial and 25 minutes for the follow-up. And, if everything's like resolved and feels good, like I just don't want to keep them on the phone for 25 minutes to waste their time. Yeah. And so we just kind of base it on like what they need after that.
So after the first call, do you give them something written, like a write-up, or do you just say, here's the 2 things I want you to start doing, and you explain it to them?
I usually just tell them the 2 things. Okay. I have started considering that maybe I should send it to them.
Yeah. But it can be overwhelming to give them like a whole plan, right? Like, here's all the millions of things you need to do, right?
Yeah. So that's the thing. I just am like, okay, I go through it on the call and like to summarize, I'm like, okay, these are the 2 things I want you to do this month. This is it. Yeah. And then they do that. They have email access to me. If they have questions, comments, problems, whatever throughout the month or between our time together, they can always email me and let me know. And a lot of people do. But, I did consider getting like a software actually where you can like write down the plan and everything for them. Mm-hmm. But I just think that at that point, I would definitely need to charge more for that.
Yeah, it's time.
To cover exactly the time piece of things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What service do you use to do these? What software do you use to?
I use Acuity.
You do? Mm-hmm. And do you just meet them on Zoom?
I actually just do phone.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to be honest with you. Sitting from 9 to 4 on Zoom was too much. I can't do it.
Totally. I could see that.
And honestly, a lot of them didn't want to do it either. Even before COVID, especially now, they don't want to do it because I do so many Zoom. But even before, some people, are at the kids' baseball game and we do it. Some people, it's just busy. And so most of my patients actually requested phone anyways.
Nice. Because the phone, they can go anywhere. They don't have to be in front of their computer. Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. That's great. I think that's great for people to hear.
Yeah.
So Acupuncturist could start offering online consults, mm-hmm. and it would probably be helpful for them to niche down with those.
Yes.
And say, we're going to talk about I offer like hormone health consults or like autoimmune or thyroid or fibromyalgia, insomnia, and like specialize mm-hmm. and really work on their expertise so that they feel they have a lot to offer just with diet and lifestyle. Which we do as acupuncturists. We know how to do that intake and mm-hmm. like diagnose and then offer diet and lifestyle plans just based on our diagnosis. So yeah. I think a thing that comes to my head is if you're giving ongoing care, you actually become more of a coach, right? In a way? To be like, have you made the changes? Why not? How can we better get you to make these changes and things mm-hmm. like that? Did you do
that's what I find like so many people do. They just like, I mean, it all depends on the person, but I have people that have been with me for literally like years that just like me as part of their team. They just like to check in. Some of them, want me to help them even just talk to their doctor, like say like, okay, this is, I think what you should ask for. This is the type of doctor you should go to for this. And just, or, they're going through a lot of stressors, things like that. Like, what are some tips and tricks that you have for me? So I obviously make it clear I'm not a mental health professional or a Western medicine doctor or anything like that. But you know what? That's the great thing about acupuncturists is we bridge a lot of those gaps for people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think we do that in our practices too, right?
Like
sometimes it's, we help people in a lot of different ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And hopefully this helps, give listeners ideas for how they could maybe move online too. So do you think if you were recommending this, if an acupuncturist was like, okay, I want to like do some online, get some online, mm-hmm. impact lives more online and make some online revenue, would you recommend first online consults or an online course?
So I think you should start with one-on-one if you don't already have a following. I think it all depends on where your following is, because in my opinion, I did this. So I started with a course. I started with a program. It was a 6 weeks program. And I just ran through my people. I just ran through my audience. And eventually 6 months later, I didn't have anyone to sell anything to anymore. And so I had to kind of go back to the drawing board and grow, come up with a better strategy than just like currently who was on my Facebook friends list to sell to. Mm-hmm. And so I think I always call it like the pre-launch runway, like whatever you're launching, whether it's one-on-one consulting, coaching, whether it's a course, whatever, you need to start adding value to your people. You need to start saying like, okay, sleep, digestion, autoimmunity, fertility, whatever you want to do, you need to start talking to that audience. And through, I mean, you know this, but through like hashtags and through the algorithm, it's going to start sending things out to people who need that information too. But I just think, you know, I know everybody wants to start a business and start making money, but I just think the online world, you have to start by adding value. And to be honest with you, in the beginning, it's not that exciting because you're offering things for free. Like it's so much of the online world is offering stuff for free and not getting paid for it, making lead magnets, you know, getting people to your email list, putting out social media all the time. You don't get paid for any of that directly, but that's how you have to start with developing trust, because the online space is so saturated right now that you have to develop trust with people.
Yeah. And otherwise they don't know all that you know and all that you can help them with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that too, that I think another good reason to start one-on-one, which I think a lot of acupuncturists have this benefit actually already, because they're doing that one-on-one with their clinic. It's just kind of realizing that they're doing it without the needles too, like how they're consulting people. But if somebody who's like fresh out of school just developed a course without working with people first, they might not know what the like questions are, the needs are. You could work so hard to create a course that like nobody actually like really wants.
Yeah.
And the one-on-one work that we do with our patients really tells us like, well, here's the like thing I'm telling people over and over again constantly that people are always asking and needing help with. And that's what
definitely, when you're going to make a course, I mean, course creation is a beast, right? Like it's a lot of work and it's amazing. I love to do it, but it's a lot of work. And so I did actually Amy Porterfield's Digital Course Academy at the end of 2019, which I'd actually already
after you had already created your courses. Some of your courses were created. Interesting. Yeah. And then you did it.
I did do it. I wanted to just do it from scratch.
So you redid all your courses?
I did. Redid them all, refilmed them, rewrote them, everything. Wow. It was the same information, sort of, most of it, but I redid it. And she suggests going through this whole process of course validation. And so, you know, actually like talking to your people, I did like course validation calls where I just did them for free and said, you know, what are you struggling with? Like what's preventing you from doing something about it? Just this laundry list of questions so that I could actually get their specific words. So that's how you can market it and you can get their exact problem, because there's so many course creators, I think, that have amazing courses. They're just more from like an expert position than like the consumer. And so they just miss it by like an inch, you know what I mean? Just not quite aligned exactly. And that can be the impact of several thousands of dollars, honestly.
Yeah. And I think it's not just so what you're saying, it's not just to validate your course, but it's also giving you like a word bank that helps you market on your sales page and your sales material. And I mean, that's really helpful even for people who don't have courses. Just acupuncturists on their websites also can make that same mistake where they're using language no one necessarily cares about or no one says themselves. And if you just like, and I teach this in my Acuprosper marketing course where it's like, actually listen to what your people are the words people are using. And
yeah, because we think that we know what people need, and we do know, but they got to know that they need it too. And so sometimes there's a little bit of like misalignment between what they think they need and what you know they need.
Yeah.
And so
I think it's harder than it seems. It's harder to actually come up with what to say, that language, and get it right.
It is hard. That's why I did the whole course, because I knew in my first rendition of this course that it was successful, and I liked it a lot, but I just knew that there was like a little bit of misalignment there. Like I wasn't marketing it great.
Interesting. And it's even harder to get that alignment right if we are staying too general, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was my problem, because heal your hormones, you know, I talk about sleep and energy and mood and periods and, you know, fertility to some extent and hot flashes, and it's too broad.
Yeah.
You have to niche down.
Yeah. You can't make people like nod their head and be like, yeah, that's me. If you're just trying to talk
Totally. And people don't understand. What I realized with hormones is that people don't actually understand that their low energy or their sleep is caused by hormones.
Yeah.
People think that hormones is your period.
Right.
Or hot flashes, maybe.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. It's such a funny thing because I have a fertility course, the Becoming Mama course, and I often look at yours and think, oh, how smart that you're applying hormones and like fertility stuff, but it is true. It touches so many aspects of people's lives, and that mine, like we're probably talking about a lot of the same things, right? Like you said,
totally.
like sleep and nutrition and energy and all that. But mine is only people who are trying to get pregnant will that resonate with, but you can hit a bigger market, right? Like everyone has hormones that are affecting their life.
Totally. But you want people when you're talking to them, and this goes for in office, this goes for marketing 101 in general. You want people when you're giving them your message to say like, yes, she's talking to me specifically. You don't want them to say like, well, I have one of these things, but maybe like I'm not the greatest candidate for this because she's talking about these other things too.
Right. So it's helpful. It's helpful to niche down. And so you do that, but you do that really well in your like Instagram and your marketing. You like make it all apply to like specific.
I try. And I still think honestly, mine is too broad to some extent because I still get a really wide variety, but I kind of like that in one-on-one. I get some teenage girls all the way to 60 something year olds. And so some of them are obviously outliers. The most majority is in their late 30s to 40s probably. But like for my course, I've actually considered doing like a period course, just solely about that so that I can market it better.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's to hear that from you. That's my biggest piece of advice when people ask me. I have a free webinar about how to choose your course topic. And I'm always like, no, smaller, more specific, more specific, more specific. It's ironically easier to market often the more specific it is.
Yeah. I've done a sleep course and I've done an anxiety course too. And it's just, you have to just keep trying different things. Like my anxiety course was really inexpensive. And I think that the price point, right, that's an interesting conversation too. Because sometimes when things are too cheap, people are like, well, I don't know about that. Too expensive. Obviously it's too expensive, but so I don't know. I think you just got to keep trying different course marketing techniques, different topics, different things until you find something that really does stick well.
And I think the same is true for acupuncture, not just online courses that people might not know acupuncture could help them with sleep, right? They think it's for back pain or headaches. And so it's really helpful actually to get really specific with your marketing, because then people are like, oh, I didn't realize that she could help me. And then they're interested. Well, that's a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing that. So can I ask you just a couple fun, random quick fire questions? So what element do you think you are?
I'm a wood.
A wood? Nice.
Yeah,
I could see that totally. Do you have a TCM hero?
I love Deborah Betts. Yeah.
Her pregnancy stuff is amazing. Yeah, she's great. And what do you eat for breakfast?
I eat eggs, like a veggie scramble with pesto and a grain-free tortilla very regularly.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. Love eggs. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share your wisdom with us. Will you let everyone know where they can find you and follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram, Ali Damron. I actually have a business podcast myself called You're So Lucky, where it's mostly all about online business. So we go through different topics about that. I have the Ali Damron Show podcast where I talk more about women's health, life, mindset, those types of things. And then the Holistic Health with Ali Damron Facebook group.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much, Ali. It was so great to connect with you.
You too. Bye.
I hope that as you work to make the world a better place, you also prosper, my friend.